Good morning, everyone. I would like to call the Agriculture Service Board July 5th, 2023 meeting to order. The meetings are recorded and may be posted on official Wheatland County social media channels. Agriculture Service Board is conducting this meeting in person and via conference call in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, Section 199. Council Chambers is open for public attendance in person while continuing to use the current telecommuting process in place. I believe Board Member Clausen was attending remotely. Do you see him on the line? Yeah. Scott, do you hear us?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Very good. Given that, do we need to vote by exception? Yes, that would be. Yeah. Okay. So for today, we'll vote by exception. If anybody is opposed, I'll ask that and we'll do it that way. All right, we have an agenda before us. Are there any additions?
We will be adding in the crop report conditions as of June 27th, and then attached to that document with some maps is the informal moisture synopsis, which will be in the ag disaster portion of the agenda.
Okay. So there's additional information related to item 2.3.2, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Doesn't really change the agenda, I guess. So if I could get a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move with the addition of the crop report conditions as of June 27th.
Great, thank you. All in favor?
Exception. Vote by exception.
Anybody opposed? I know, I'm sorry. Hearing none, that is passed. Sorry, guys, you're gonna have to help me out here today. Struggling along. All right, then adoption of the minutes. We have the minutes from the April 5th, 2023 meeting. Any corrections or omissions?
If there are none, I will move the minutes.
Thank you, Member Eichert. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, that is passed. So we have a 9:30 appointment. That's coming up. So we'll move to item 2.3.1, evergreens under duress in Wheatland County. George, you're up.
Good morning, everyone. Through the chair of the board, I'd like to talk about evergreens under duress in Wheatland County. There is an update in this report. We've been at 4 testings. We are currently at 5 now. They have all come back inconclusive regarding needle cast, which is what we suspected in combination with drought. Now, drought does take 1 to 3 years before damage starts to really show signs. There's some great information provided in this attachment to this item from Toso, and Toso is a ex-long-term employee with agriculture and forestry. He has always specialized in tree health, and he's a wealth of information. He actually taught our shelter belt program this previous winter. So all the samples that came back inconclusive, there were lower rates of infection of fungal, but was not enough to declare that that is the main cause of the death. So I did reach out to several other neighboring municipalities, and everybody's having very similar issues with white spruce, Colorado spruce, and all the blue spruce species specifically, which is unusual because those blue spruces are usually supposed to be the bulletproof tree, right? So, and even within our organization, we've had lots of people having troubles with them, and it's a big problem. You can drive down the road and see in farmyards, these spruce trees are dying, and even under constant irrigation, they're still taking a hit. So those 38-degree days, when you have 3 weeks of them in a row, I'm not sure enough watering will ever be enough. However, I thought it would be good to bring this attention to the board so they do know that we are actively trying to support our ratepayers and keep their trees healthy. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have a question. So inconclusive, but it's likely or possible that it could have fungal infection. Is in a drought, is it still okay to spray for that?
There's a lot of different products out there, and I couldn't specifically say generally yes or no. You would have to follow the label directions to a T to be sure. And then when you're spraying off a label, there's no guarantees. So if you had an issue with a chemical rep and they know that you're spraying off label, they will not compensate you for the product or any kind of damage that it may have. Now, it seems counterintuitive that drought would increase fungal infections, but it weakens the tree's system, so infections can happen more readily. So
Yep.
It's a really two-punch item.
Any, have you seen any like spider mite activity? Because that's another thing that I think in a drought situation, those guys get out of control in trees as well. So
That's correct. Yes, we've had reports of webbing happening on the trees. Spider mites are fairly easy to take care of, and it would take generally years and years of infection of spider mites before you would start to see significant damage. Although when you're drought, fungal infection, spider mites, and every other pest, it's all cumulative.
Yep.
So there's, if it was just spider mites, that's a very easy correction. Just a tree sprayer and some BT and off you go.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we don't have a spray for drought. Well, we do, but we're waiting for it.
Yeah, I had issues with my trees probably 15 or 20 years ago. Same kind of thing. And it's terrible to think that your whole shelter belt could be gone with like a fungal. That's what we had, the needle cast.
Mm-hmm.
So we sprayed it and we saved them. But I think some people maybe let it get too far, and then I don't know if it would come back, especially under a situation like this where they're also under drought pressure. So yeah, it's good to address it as soon as you can and get on it, and then.
And just one more reminder, a little plug-in for Wheatland County's Shelter Belt program. We are always at capacity in that program, so we are always having a waiting list, but that is something, you know, we do to remediate this problem throughout the county. So Shelter Belt program is a very well-liked program. It opens up and it fills up immediately. So
that's really good. We might have to look at if there's lots of dieback, lots more people wanting it, we might have to review that in the future. Very good information. I know it's affected lots of my neighbors, and I've heard lots about it in the area. So yeah, watch out for it and take action. Call George and get the information. If you see, yeah, it's kind of a weird, like purplish kind of color that the trees go, don't they?
It depends on a bunch of different factors. But we are happy to take samples and send them out to the Alberta Plant Lab. Mm-hmm. So if any ratepayers or anybody in Wheatland County is interested in that, we you know, that's something we take very seriously, and we send that off immediately.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for the report. Mm-hmm. Any other questions or comments? Anybody else see this in their farmsteads? Not yet. That's good. Being fungal, it's like spores that spread in the wind. So with the windy situations we've had too, it's another, it just adds that another layer of risk. So keep your eyes out.
It's so easy to grow a tree in this.
Well, you'd hate to start over, yeah, a 30-year shelter belt. So anyways, yeah. Could I get somebody to move to accept for information?
I'll move that the board accept as information the Evergreens Under Duress and Wheatland County report as presented.
Thanks, Member Link. Is anybody opposed? Hearing none, that is passed. Now, I do see that our 9:30 appointment has arrived. Hello, this must be Baz. Hi, welcome. If you'd like, we could start your presentation now, and yeah, we can start her now, and yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
If you don't mind just introducing yourself and
Sure. Am I being live streamed or is this just, it is recorded? Okay, I'll be careful what I say. It'll be published. Perfect. Good morning. My name is Bassal. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Global Training Center. That's one of my hats. I know I recognize some of the individuals in this room with some of my other hats, and I'll maybe talk just a little bit to give you some context about why I'm here and what I'm going to present on. So Global Training has developed or is in the process of developing an agricultural rescue and extrication course. As well, it's leveraged around farm safety. The program is in development, so the knowledge component, if you will, the workbook, PowerPoint, all that stuff that goes with the knowledge, the cognitive has been developed. We are still in the process of developing the actual hands-on practical. We're at a bit of a conundrum because there are others that are doing this in industry. I've been involved in the fire service for 31 years in Strathmore as well as emergency management. So very well in tune with what's happening out in industry. And a good friend of mine, Randy Schmitz, is also doing some vehicle extrication, farm extrication stuff. He's paired up with Olds College. Ours is a bit more unique than that, as it isn't so much focused on just the responders. There is also a component of farm safety in there, which we think is kind of an added value. But the program is not live yet. So what you're seeing is actually the first public presentation of the content, and it is still being refined. So it's not at 100% yet. So I wanted to give you an overview of kind of what kind of the program contains, what we're talking about. As you are aware, farm safety is critical. There are numerous incidents in the farming community. We start off with some stats and everything else to just highlight the fatalities and the types of injuries that go along with it. So I've been with Global for 21 years. We do dabble in kind of the emergency response. It is not our big player. Most of our stuff is on occupational health and safety. So things like fall protection, confined space, defensive driving, first aid, that kind of stuff is this. But we feel there's a specialty that's required for this, especially with the number of incidents in the farming community. It seems to be going up. So the other side of this is where personally I would like to go with it. Some of this is on the reactive side, obviously after an incident has happened. So you're going to see, things like entrapment and how to work on that. I would also like to spin this off and use it as a proactive measure on the prevention side. So we can work with the farming community to highlight the dangers. And most of the farming community knows, but it's nice to have a refresher and maybe some tips and tricks on, keeping your family safe and those kinds of things. So that's a bit of an introduction. Any expectations from you folks for me, what you'd like to hear from me or where you'd like to see this go? I'll take your silence as I'll just keep going and present. Feel free to interrupt with any questions or comments as we go along. So, am I buying lunch? I'm working on a couple hours of sleep because we had a structure fire last night. Yeah. But yes, I will buy lunch. Someday I will buy lunch. So this is the PowerPoint that goes, it's obviously condensed because it's designed to be hands-on as well. So to be a component in the classroom right now, there's a number of people that have contributed to this. Most of those are fire-related people, as well as a fellow by the name of Bill Coombs, who's with Transcare Rescue out of Saskatchewan. He does also work with Randy Schmitz, so there's an overlap there. We have worked with a lot of fire chiefs, the Hannah Fire Chief, the previous Strathmore Fire Chief, Trent West, and a number of others have contributed to this. So this has been almost a year plus in development and such. So what we cover in the program is we always try to start off with a bit of a hook for training, right? To get to the why am I here? So we start off with some statistics. We also talk about the types of equipment, farm equipment typically involved in these types of incidents, as well as the common types of mishaps. Now we get into a little bit of, first responder safety, so scene assessment, hazard control, the types of injuries, the types of incidents, the types of rescue equipment, entrapment, and then a critical component which you probably wouldn't have seen in previous training is the post-incident, the stress management at the end, taking care of the family and the first responders. That's built into this as well. So we say it's by choice, not by chance. So education is a good component of it. These are the stats, and you're going to look at them and go, they're a bit dated, but that's the latest stats that are available and published by the Canadian agricultural community. So 369 farm-related fatalities in that 9-year period. The staggering component of that is children. As many of us know and probably have some personal experience within this region, there are kids that are involved in pretty horrific farming incidents, and they account for 19% of those fatalities.
Just a question.
Yes, sir.
So out of that 19%, like what are you categorizing that for age? Is that 18 and under?
18 and under.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
correct. So the other component of that is those agricultural related fatalities, right? The majority of them, close to 50%, 44%. Machine rollovers, okay? Runovers, being run over by equipment or being pinned and struck by equipment. So that's nearly half of those fatalities are that. Machines involved in just about 70% of the incidents. And again, most of us intuitively know that based on the type of experiences we have, but it's just to drive to the fact that, farm machineries working in and around them is dangerous, and if not treated properly, can lead to fatalities. Another interesting statistic, but not surprising, is just over 90% are males that are fatalities. So agricultural for us in the emergency services are different. They're not like your car accidents or accidents in the home. The equipment is different, right? The operations is different. The post-incident is different, and that's a bit unique. And I'll relate that more so to the community. A little bit different in Strathmore. Strathmore's still a small community, but when you go to the city, these incidents don't typically affect a larger population. You have an incident in a farming community, it affects a lot of folks, as everybody in this room knows. From my experience, when you do have something happen in an agricultural community, everybody pulls together. Families come to help look for individuals that are lost. They come over and provide support. So it's a larger network that's affected. Obviously, the costs are larger when it comes to an incident, and that's because of the equipment that's usually required for the rescue. Hazards are a bit different. Equipment, sometimes the incidents don't happen at high speeds like on the highway. A low speed incident with a combine can be pretty detrimental. This one I'm not 100% sure of. No airbags in farming equipment. I would imagine probably you look in a few years down the road, you probably have some safety related airbags in some of that equipment, but simply the size of the equipment and the resources to respond to those incidents are different than they would be in a typical municipal setting. So the program goes over the types. I've obviously condensed this, but I just wanted to highlight kind of the incidents we are covering with the program. So rollover and run over accidents. There's a lot of vehicles that roll over right? And the majority of the rollovers involve tractors and the other involve off-road vehicles. And if you're watching the news and paying attention, there's a lot of ATV type of incidents. I read the other day, unfortunately, that 3-year-old boy passed away just north of here with an ATV accident that happened. I think it was a week or week and a half ago. So it does happen. Go over the common causes of rollovers. So traveling too close to an edge, traveling on an incline and not handling the equipment properly, cornering, rough terrain, and surprisingly towing. That one surprised me, but again, in my experience, pulling people out when they're stuck can lead to equipment failure. So the equipment comes apart and it becomes a projectile, or the vehicle is tips over and rolls. So those are the common causes. Obviously, the next couple of slides are more so pictures than anything, but the trapped or impinned, where you have slow moving vehicles on roads involved in motor vehicle accidents, because they are larger, they take a lot of extrication to move that vehicle, involving a lot of cribbing, sometimes heavy wreckers, so it does take longer. We also need to take care with the victim, okay, if they're pinned underneath, because if we move the equipment too quickly, it can cause other kinds of medical conditions. So we want to make sure that we're treating each incident with the hazards that are presented. The others, as you'll see, I threw lots of statistics in here. 61 fatalities due to entanglement, and the majority of that is loose clothing and hair. So, there's a lot performing near rotating equipment, trying to clean equipment or repair equipment without shutting it off. So, in a safety industry, there's lockout, tagout, where we have to make sure that energy is isolated. Unfortunately, in farming applications, sometimes the equipment is still running, and people try to unplug or work on the equipment while it's still running. And the other 13% trying to remove a blockage without having the equipment shut off. So crush injuries, incidents, obviously, you're very familiar with what happens on the road. The same techniques apply for us, but when you involve a combine in such an incident, obviously weights are astronomically bigger. So the amount of equipment required to move that equipment is a specialty. Speaking of combines, right, here are the common types of incidents involving contact with power lines, running over and hitting objects or people near the combine, attempting to clear the obstructions, limited vision, limited space, exceeding the speed limit, okay, or speeding on a road or wherever, refueling when the equipment is hot, and attempting to repair or adjust equipment with the equipment running. Not only do we focus on the equipment, we also focus on some of the activities such as silage pits. They present a unique hazard in itself with not only the atmosphere they contain, but also the construction of it and the failure of those. You see on the news failures of excavations. Recently in the city of Calgary, a young man was buried in an excavation that was 20 feet down, right? A plumber working on that. Same thing can happen if you enter a silage pit and you have a failure. Manure pits are obviously dangerous as well, right? And that leads to, drowning. Drowning, 25 non-machine related fatalities in that same period were due to drowning. 44% occurred in dugouts, 16% in lakes, and 16% in manure pits or sewage lagoons. And the other staggering statistic for me is, again, over half of that were children, and those were less than 10 years old. So those are young lives that are affected, obviously, by this. Go into a little bit of a sewage tanks and cellars. I love talking about this because my mother and father-in-law have a farm, or used kind of a quasi farm down in Vulcan, and they always used to have their potatoes and their onions down in the cellar. And because I was the new son-in-law, guess who got to go get the potatoes and the onions from the cellar, right? And you're going down a rickety old ladder, then going in a silage pit that, or a cellar pit that's, I don't know, 10, 12 feet down, right? And the first time I went in, I'm like, well, okay. Second time, I'm like, that's not very smart, right? So borrowed a gas detector from Global and I went down. And they're going to think, boy, that guy's a nerd, right? Safety nerd. But actually, surprisingly, you have reduced oxygen in those pits. And it's anytime you get decaying organic matter, you start to affect the atmosphere. So, so probably to you, not surprising,
surprising.
not surprising at all, right? So not only can you affect the oxygen, but you do encounter H2S as well, right? Anytime you get decaying organic matter, you have the potential for H2S creation, and hydrogen sulfide gas is extremely poisonous at very low dosages. So we cover that in the program. It is not a hazmat program. So hazmat operations are in the emergency response and fire service. That's, you know, a separate piece of training, and you can go anything from awareness to operations to a technical piece, and that requires a lot of training. However, because of the abundance of anhydrous ammonia used in the farming community, there is a bit in there about anhydrous ammonia, about safe handling, and obviously working around the rescue component. So just the fact of highlighting that, you know, usually regular firefighting gear, not the best for dealing with anhydrous ammonia. You can quickly get a victim out of the area with SCBA, but it's not meant to work in there in prolonged periods of time. We do work on grain entrapment as well, and highlight that because that it also occurs, and it's a difficult rescue. There's lots of advents in the tools that have been developed over recent years to assist with grain rescues, because as you're entrapped in grain, it gets very difficult to get the patient out. One of the things we've done is, if you have time, and I don't know what my timing is right now, we did prepare a little video that we include in the training, and I'll show it here. It's not that long, but we created a simulator. Just our belief is, I mean, I can stand here and talk all day. That's what I get paid to do for the majority of my time. But just to show and have some simulations, that ties it together a lot for people as well. I'm not sure if you can hear that, if I can turn it up.
Here comes the young guy.
Yeah. We built that prop just to showcase what happened. So that's just a quick little video of it, but it's a built prop that we use in the classroom. The other thing we talk about is livestock handling. Again, not a course in livestock handling. There's special training and there's people that are very qualified in dealing with that, but just the knowledge of having livestock handling trailers available and just how to reach out to them, because there are a number of those located in Alberta. For us, probably our closest one here is Brooks and Hannah, to be able to call in, but just a highlight of that, and as well getting a hold of the specialty folks that deal with that, because dealing with horses and cattle has got its unique hazards as well, and each animal behaves differently. And then there's other unique hazards, which, sorry, not unique hazards, but hazards that are in every workplace, working at heights. So, working off a ladder, or, working on top of a bunch of bales, as well as the chemicals used, such as pesticides. So specifically when it comes to falling from heights, there's your percentages, right? So the majority falling off of barn lofts or upper roofs or rafters, or working on silos or the roof of any structure, and 6% are actually off bales and haystacks. So chemicals, obviously, my experience, and this is no disrespect to the farming community or my father-in-law, but we tend to collect a lot, and we tend to keep a lot, and especially near our homes. My father-in-law loves to not throw anything away. So barrels and barrels of unmarked substances around the farm. So, in addition to the regular chemicals we have, such as anhydrous or pesticides or fuels, there's a lot of other toxins that are kept in the farm. And just to, specifically around things like, propane. Again, a little bit of a soapbox for me, but propane cylinders. I mean, in a regular municipal setting, you probably have one or two for your barbecue. Every fire I go to in a rural setting, I'm usually dealing with 10 or 12 propane cylinders. And same, couldn't be. That's same as my father-in-law. He's got a propane cylinder for everything, right? One for the barbecue.
And none of them are expired either.
We won't go into that. That's why I was asking if I was being taped.
You probably better explain Levy, because other than me, I doubt anybody.
Okay. So a BLEVE is a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. So that's one of the risks with a propane cylinder, is when it's heated from the outside, the propane, the liquid inside, starts to boil. And because the way they're constructed, the cylinder can't handle that increase in pressure, that rapid increase in pressure. So the cylinder blows up, and that's called a BLEVE, and they're very dangerous, very explosive. So whenever we have propane tanks involved in fire, we take a lot of special care to make sure, we can get them cooled, and if we can't get them cooled, that distances are maintained. And the distances, please don't ask me, because I don't remember. I have a little book that tells me the distances, but just a regular farm tank, the distances are they're around a kilometer, if not larger. So
Like a 500-gallon
stationary tank, you bet, right? And then also recognizing the failure points. The failure points typically are at the ends.
Always.
Yeah, so that they're designed that way. So all that information is knowledge that we can share, right? Which the average person probably doesn't know. So for me, knowledge is power, right? If you don't know, you panic. If you do know, you're still going to panic. It's still a stressful situation, but you're able to handle it a little better. So for me, that's one of the components of the program is sharing all that information. Now, specifically related to, the rescue side, there's a lot of equipment, and that's where we're building scenarios. So, having having a body part entrapped in a grain auger, you're going to require some special equipment to get that out, because it's not only getting the person extricated from the equipment, it's making sure we don't do any more harm to the patient. So it's not as simple as just getting, you know, a grinder out or a torch out and start cutting. We have to make sure that the patient is protected and we do no more harm to that patient. So there's a lot of extrication equipment required, and it's always about building your plans. And that's kind of, you know, the blocking and cribbing. The reason we show this on a, you know, a car accident, we pull off a couple of cribs to crib a regular passenger vehicle. To crib a combine takes a lot. So it's again, it's a little bit different. And then the end of the program, we talk about making sure we take care of the families and the responders. It's a huge piece of emergency response right now is making sure we're taking care of the folks that are affected by this incident. And when you think about it, you know, when I first broke out into EMS and fire many years ago, there wasn't all this help for our responders. But it's not only the responders, it's the family, it's the connected families, it's the folks in the hospital that are dealing with these traumas that are coming in. And this is more prevalent in a smaller community like ours, because we do know a lot of people and it affects us personally. So, you know, it's making sure we have that peer support for the stresses that go along with the job. And as the last point says, you're likely to know somebody in a rural situation. So we need to take care of those individuals. And then the learnings. I think that one of the things that I personally think is one of the opportunities is to learn from others, right? And, you know, if we have an incident, although tragic in nature, we need to learn from that and focus our educational opportunities towards those, right? Not to belabor or highlight the incident, but from the prevention side. What can we do to prevent a reoccurrence? Because the incident has already happened. What can we do to make it better for somebody else? And then we did include some supplemental. This is kind of still in beta development, but we threw some extra stuff in on pesticides in particular, and as well rural mapping, because it's changed over the years, and not that it affects response that much, but it's nice to have people understand some rural mapping. So that's kind of, I'll flip through that because that's kind of the end of the program. As you can see, it is focused on first responders, but there's an opportunity to educate the farming community as well. We are right now working with Transcare to develop the scenarios that go along with it and working on training the instructors that are going to be delivering that. Everybody asks me what my crystal ball is usually for when this is going to go live. Right now, our plan is to develop the instructors over the summer months and be able to run out probably in Q3 or Q4, which probably for the farming community means probably spring of next year is probably realistic. Yeah, George.
I saw that in the book that you had provided us, there was a couple prerequisites to go to attend this course.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is there will be a contingent in the future for like general public to attend?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it started off with some development specifically for the emergency response sector. And to be honest with you, it initially focused on fire response. It has grown just with how the content came together. So we see a lot of value in not only fire response, but also medical response, because sometimes medical personnel are the first to respond. And I'm not sure, based on my experience in EMS, which is a bit outdated, but they never did a really good job of really educating EMS professionals about the hazards, right? The hazards in the workplace. And you can see that, you know, BC, they had a couple of medics get killed going to rescue somebody in a mine, right? Where they had, you know, a deficient oxygen atmosphere. So our view has broadened, and that's the beauty of development. You start off with a bit of a brainchild, and it's kind of grown. And as I said, I see a real opportunity to expand this we'd probably have to tweak the content a bit because the farming community probably doesn't need as much, or if any, on extrication, more so how to avoid that piece of it. So we could take the content and massages towards a farming community, a farm safety, if you will, program. But yeah, it started off, and just as everything, it kind of evolved, and it continues to evolve. And I think that's also for us a bit of the conundrum that we're in, because Randy Schmitz is also doing it. I know Randy has done actually some training for Wheatland West for the fire department here with entrapment and stuff. So they've already got some of those basics. So our focus has shifted a bit to kind of broaden the horizons. Okay, great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad to see you're focusing on how not to get into the situation in the first place. But I think particularly with agriculture accidents more than others, the first responder, if you would like to call it that, will be another member of that farm.
Yeah.
And as we know, or you and I know at least, that the first job of any first responder is to first protect themselves, not become a second victim. So in your course, are you teaching them that kind of stuff to assess the situation before? I mean, it's very difficult when it's someone you know that's in trouble, but you have to remember that if you're the next casualty, you're not helping anybody. So is that a component of your training?
Yes, it is a component. I didn't include it a lot, but there was a section in there on scene assessment and hazard assessment.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And that's the piece where we would talk about that, because you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the hardest step ever, but the first step in an emergency needs to be back, not in towards the incident.
Yeah.
And again, as you said, it's the hardest step because it is a loved one or a family member or a close friend that's involved.
Yeah.
But the first step needs to be back to allow your brain to catch up.
In the industry, there's been so many, particularly with H2S, they'll see someone go down, and they'll go in to rescue that person, and then they're down.
That's right. Yeah, and you never know why the person went down.
That's right.
You know, it could be a heart attack, or it could be a hazardous atmosphere, which you don't know. Could be carbon monoxide just from, you know, a car running in the garage.
Yeah.
As simple as that. But you see somebody laying beside the car, and your first instinct is to run in. So, you know, firefighter, first responder safety is always prime. It needs to be.
Yeah.
And you know, we need to take care of ourselves, because if the responder is hurt, then there's nobody to provide that service, right? It delays it, and it keeps piling, unfortunately, bodies on bodies based on our past.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Typically happens. Yeah.
Very good point. Thank you. Any other questions?
I
George?
have one more question.
Okay.
Sorry. You
No worries.
mentioned cooling down propane tanks when they're super hot,
Mhm.
and I had no idea you could do that. You can just spray water on propane tanks when they're super hot, and that's
Yep.
Yeah.
a safe thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, we would do that with an unmanned.
Right.
So if we have nozzles that just sit on the ground, and ideally it's an unmanned nozzle that we could just place there. It's a little bit different in a rural application, because one of the challenges with rural firefighting is the lack of water. So as you know, we typically bring water, you know, in a rural application. So it takes a lot of water to cool those tanks. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you're interested in it, you know, get one of the young folks in the back to show you YouTube and pull up a Blevy video. You'd be surprised at the damage that's caused by a propane tank that explodes, and you see it a lot in this area, right? We just a year and a half ago, the Highway 9, the fire just on the highway at the camping facility that's just right beside the county office. There were a lot of propane bottles that were going off there, and the highway, at least the westbound lanes of the highway, were shut down because of that, because of the risk associated with that. So,
And it's always good to remember too that any pressure vessel is designed, particularly the stationary tanks, they're engineered so that the ends will blow off, not the barrel part of it. And it's the same thing with propane tanks. And you always have to remember too that if you have a pressure tank that's like a 100-pound propane bottle, for example, if the cap gets, or the valve gets knocked off, that thing then becomes a projectile.
yeah, And then, so there's also rules for filling propane tanks to certain capacity,
80%,
only 80%. But my father-in-law may or may not have
Yeah, there's a lot
overfilled
of
them
people
at
that-
times. And again, that's without being aware of the hazards associated, you're just doing what you've always been told or always been taught. So,
Yeah.
so that's why the knowledge component is nice.
Some of us probably shouldn't talk about how full we filled the tanks at the gas plant, hey, Barry?
No.
So when this course is completed and it is available for the general public,
To attend, there will be no prerequisites as of like you have to be over a certain age or anything like that.
No, because usually the practical components are what causes us to put that minimum age on, right? So, like an ATV program, you have to be a minimum age to take the program because you're riding an ATV and demonstrating skills. But the knowledge transfer, I think that's of any age. Yes, Mr. Eichert.
I think this is a great idea, especially the farm safety part of it, because human nature being what it is, if I use my experience on the construction site, I know what is safe practices, and you automatically assume that everybody else does.
Mm-hmm.
And that causes so much problem, especially in the farming community. Who's coming into the farming? It's not, that you're bringing people in that have never ever done this before. Like in a lot of situations, you're training new people that that have come out of an urban setting and all this kind of stuff. And the size of the equipment nowadays, and that has changed so much that just hauling a one of these air seeders around.
Yeah.
You turn on one part of the yard and the back wheels, you're 100 feet away from your back wheels by the time the rest of the machine. And I think this would be a fantastic course for farmers to just to realize, just to be re-educated on the stuff that becomes natural, because they work from their, if you're old enough, you've worked from your 14-foot seed drill up to your 80-foot air seeder. And you sort of got that knowledge a little bit at a time. But when you're bringing in people that have never seen this stuff before and they have no concept of what the damage is, I can see an awful lot of benefit for this, more on the farm safety part of it than the extraction thing. Because like you say, that if somebody gets caught in an auger, like the specialty tools you have to get them out of there. You just can't tell them, okay, we're just going to fire up the auger. You've lost your foot already. We're just going to refire the auger up and drag you out at that point, try to keep you from being sucked in more. That's probably the wrong way to do things. So, but it's I really, really like this idea that, I think it's been, it's very specialized because they're becoming less and less farming operations. They're just becoming a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And
and the equipment keeps getting bigger and more advanced, but the hazards are still the same. You still got rotating equipment, and you see people just, I would say, the common sense doesn't mean common application, because what's common to me may not be common to others based on our upbringing. So, I may not see the hazard of, just stepping across a PTO. I'm just rationalized it in my own brain that, it's quicker for me to get from A to B just to step over it, not realizing that, what if that catches my pant leg? There's some pretty nasty things that are occurring, right? Just taking that time to go around the piece of equipment versus just trying to save a bit of time. But we've always got an opportunity. I think that's why I'm still in this business of training and educating, because I think we can prevent so much from occurring. And I'm not standing in front of you saying I'm perfect, because we do go to the farm, and sometimes, the pressures of time and everything, you go, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. But just maybe getting that second to go, I need to think about this, right? How can I get hurt? How could I do it differently? And just allowing your brain that opportunity to think sometimes is all it needs. And sometimes that's just the awareness we need. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Have you thought about how you're going to distribute it to the public in terms of holding courses or things like that. I'm just thinking farmers, you know, they might be more interested in a webinar type thing that they can look, you know, watch on their phones or some other way of, they tend not to like to come into something they think they already know, you know, to spend the time.
The answer is no. However, there are multiple delivery options available, because in our business, I'm sure you've heard of this little thing called COVID that's happened a few years past. It's caused us to shift our business and our delivery models. So we have shifted a lot of our online core training online as well as virtual. So we're set up, we do training virtually now so we have a virtual room where an instructor sits and delivers a program virtually.
Okay.
So all those are options. For us, the biggest thing is creating the content, and then the delivery mode can be molded to whatever the audience kind of needs. But you know, it's insight from folks like yourselves that actually would help us to get the best delivery model. Because I mean, whether we put an instructor in front of a group or put them in front of a computer and do it as a webinar, to us it doesn't matter. It's the person. It's just the delivery mode that's a little bit different. So we call it instructor-led or virtual or online, and we have the capabilities to do all that stuff. You know, before we invest in online, it does take a little bit of market research on our part, because it does take some financial dollars to put an online course together. But virtual is very simple to do. We could probably do this course just with a knowledge component tomorrow in a virtual application.
Right.
So thank you for that.
And would you be going to schools as well to like do a little bit for?
It hasn't been a consideration, but we do educate. We do. Careful. We do education in schools, because we have our own first aid training program, and there's times when we've been asked to not deliver a first aid training course, if you will, within the local schools, but just to give them snippets, which we have done in the past.
That's really good.
And so again, pre-COVID, it's kind of taken a little bit but Global also has a Global Legacy Foundation, which is something that the staff had built over time, where we want to give back to the community. So there's that foundation, which is also on educating in the community. So there's an opportunity, I think, that way to give back as well.
Yeah, I see this isn't really, your core is more about the first responders and things like that, but these, you know, you're already developing the program, so now it's the delivery part that
Exactly.
Be wonderful to see it in the schools and some options for farmers to take advantage. Yeah,
Thank you.
it's very good.
I appreciate your time this morning. I've taken a little bit more than I anticipated. I apologize for that, but I thank you for the opportunity.
We appreciate it, and we appreciate you taking all the time you did, because it was really informative and just an excellent presentation. Thank you.
And if you're looking for us, we're just located south of
Yeah.
Strathmore. Thank you for your time.
Great. Have a great day. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks, Baz.
You bet.
I'm sure we'll run into each other again.
I certainly will. One of my many hats.
Yeah.
I guess I should also say that if you're ever wanting to work with the Ag Service Department to disseminate information, or, you know, we'd be happy to work with you if it could help in some way. Keep us in mind, I guess, is
An interesting sideline, and I apologize if I ruffle some feathers. My newest employee is actually an ex-county employee, and he's doing some work. He's doing some work in our print and licensee division. So I asked him to print a copy of the program for me, and he was looking through it, and he actually made that comment. He said, "You know what? There's because there's an acknowledgements in the front, and it was all, you know, fire individuals." He goes, "I think you're missing an opportunity." He said, "This should go through the agricultural community, specifically through the Ag Services Boards of the counties." And I'm like, "Have I got a deal for you? Guess where I'm going next week?" So it actually worked out. He says the fireside's typically slower to pick up on stuff, whereas this might be an avenue to get more knowledge out. So once again, thank you very much.
That's one final comment. If you'd ever like to submit some advertisement for this program, we could put that in the county connector that
Okay.
gets distributed out. So please keep us in mind and our
Wonderful.
meeting website as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
So could I get somebody to accept for information the report provided?
Also move.
Thank you, Member Baker. Is anybody opposed? That is carried.
Could I also just move that our ASB administration works with Global to share information through our multimodal communication like social media website, County Connector, just to increase awareness once the course is prepared?
Fantastic. Great. Thank you. Is anybody, any discussion, I guess?
My only other thought, and it's not directly related to the motion, but related to the program, is whether it would be worth having our ASB staff or a couple of designates go through the course. Twofold thoughts around that, for the training for county employees, but also it may provide feedback for Global as well, just in terms of practical application for our egg producers in Wheatland County, just because of the insight that our administration could bring. I'm sure there's opportunities within our fire services and emergency management as well, but I would leave it up to administration to determine. I don't know what administration's thoughts are on that. But.
When I was employed with Yellowhead County, I'd approached ag service societies to provide first aid for kids under 18 that were ratepayers. I'm already thinking in my mind here that this might be a great opportunity for us to subsidize maybe some attendance for some kids to attend something like this in partnership with some other organizations so that everybody's got a bit of skin in the game. So that's something I'd like to bring forward potentially for the next meeting. Great.
It's a great idea.
I think, George, just to add to that, I think it would be good if we could talk to the folks at Global and see if they're able to tailor this more to young kids, because that's the first. I mean, it's better that they know it before, what sometimes happens, Dad says, get on that thing and go do it. Then, if they don't learn it until they're 16 or 17, they've already been, I think I was 10 the first time I went to town for grain. That probably doesn't happen anymore, but.
And things like ATV driving and things like that, obviously kids are much younger than they're meant to be to drive those things. So I think they need to, have some.
And that's typically where a lot of this starts, is an ATV or a gator, and just not knowing that just because you go over the edge of the coulee to chase a cow doesn't mean that thing's not going to roll over.
Yeah.
Nobody uses ATVs for cows, do they, Sandra?
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to, sorry, I'm lost.
Increase awareness through
Share
communication channels
share
for the
information.
program.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Is anybody opposed? Hearing none, that's carried. Did you want to make another motion about having attendance?
I would leave it with administration. If you're working on some potential programming options to bring back to the next meeting, I would just leave it in your hands. So I just think it's a great opportunity with what's being developed and the fact that it's local. I just would hate for that to be lost. So, and I like Member Lauerson's idea, if there is an opportunity to tailor it to youth. I think that's a great idea as well, and perhaps could be discussed with Global. They are very responsive to sort of safety requirements and training requirements. So
Administration is also very engaged with the classroom ag program. So I think that there is potential to insert some of that in there and potentially reach out to some more colony schools and such with some kind of programming like that as well.
That's a very good point too. Yeah. Yeah, there's just excellent partnership opportunities between our ag service group and them. So yeah.
And I would suggest that we probably, and I don't know how you do this, but for the migrant workers that are because I'm thinking about the guys that have brought, these immigrants from the Ukraine and that kind of stuff. These are all rural or all urban people from the Ukraine. And I'm not sure if it would just like, just to bring everybody up to speed on, because, what you don't know what you don't know, I think is what.
Excellent. That was a great presentation, great discussion, you guys. It's really good. Let's continue on then with our agenda. We're on 2.3.2, guidelines and information related to declaring an agricultural disaster.
Good morning, ASB. Through the chair, I'd just like to talk about this potential for declaring an ag emergency. You can see the CAO's comments here about concerns about potentially a premature declaration, diminishing its significance. There's also the attachments of all the documents and the recent June 27th crop conditions as well to take into consideration. As of June 28th, Foothills County had also declared agricultural emergency as well. I'm not sure if anybody caught that. And then if there is an ag disaster declaration, we can retract that declaration as well if conditions improve, something to think about. Moving forward, we will be tracking crop conditions a lot closer every 2 to 3 weeks. In addition to participating in the Alberta Crop Report, the ASB department will go out and take some additional sampling and record those conditions as well. So, if anybody has any questions, I'll try my best.
So I was grateful to have this on the agenda. I have had some agricultural producers just asking if the county is like considering the data, if we're contemplating declaring. Some of our agricultural producers are aware that municipalities in the other municipalities in the area have declared. I appreciate the guide and just the information around the fact that a municipal declaration doesn't necessarily trigger programming or funding programming being initiated like a provincial declaration does. But then we also have agricultural producers that understand that a municipal declaration can just raise the awareness to the province about the gravity of, the condition. And I realize we have like very diverse conditions across the province. And the point that was made by a few of our agricultural producers was just that, is it a disservice to our agricultural producers who are severely impacted to not declare just because we do have some areas that have had more moisture or are not in as severe drought conditions? I guess what I would look to administration is what your recommendation is at this point, recognizing the diversity across the municipality. And part of it, I think, too, is just over the last few years, like this being sort of the third year of challenge. And I think producers are very aware of the issues that they had with, feedstock and access, and the timing of that is so critical. And because provincial conditions between drought and now flooding are going to, they seem like polar opposites, but could see pretty grave, outcomes based on that across the province. So looking, I guess, for your advice and what you would recommend.
Well, according to our data that we are in the pending to declaring a disaster area. We have data only from fair to poor on crops as of this point. So the cereals, we have about 58% fair to poor. And then that is a pending disaster because we can't flesh out the fair to poor, unfortunately, at this time. So, and the pastures are also 38% fair to poor as well. So we are definitely in that pending area. So I think my recommendation would be to let the ASB decide. I think that we have some farmers on this board, so I think that their knowledge is probably more in tune than mine would be. I don't get out in the field as much as I used to. I do notice that there is a very uneven spread throughout the county. Every hilltop with canola is bare. That is a terrible sign. And Glenn had talked about how the gophers were taller than his wheat. We do know that there is going to be significant pest pressures moving forward with grasshoppers and flea beetles. So I think all of these things combined with the idea that you can retract later on if conditions improve, that there is some flexibility with this declaration. So I would, I think it would be advisable for the producer members to maybe say their piece if they have something to say.
I think this is fairly countywide. I just actually got a screenshot from, well, from Eric. And he's got a fairly extensive weather station, and in an area where they're typically not faced with a drought, in the west of Standard area. And he said that the water uptake by plants is now down to 70 meters down, and it's rapidly depleting. Now, that might not make a sense to everybody, but if you know agriculture, that's pretty serious. And the fact that we have no rain predicted I mean, we're typically getting into our driest part of the year now, and we're already, I mean, I can show you stuff at home that's headed out that's, 4 inches tall, and plants are 8, 9, 10 inches apart. When you can see the ground at this time of the year, there's a problem. And most of my grass, the hard grass, and it's very similar to everyone else that has hard grass, most of it hasn't even greened up yet this year.
Crops is one thing. They'll come and dry up and you get what you get. What the real disaster is, especially in Wheatland County, is the livestock. There's no pastures out there. Cow-calf are being sold off. People are complaining. Prices are really good. But where's the industry? Who's going to put the replacements in when
Hay prices too.
yeah, here hay prices, first cut of hay approaching $400. Nobody can
Afford that.
well, you don't know what the future is, but you're taking a risk. A couple of years ago, we were in a drought situation, and the province worked with AFSC, and they said if there was use for the crop for livestock, either feed or pasture, when it got down to, I believe, 14 bushel in wheat, they said write it off. That would make them, and that really helped. That really helped the livestock producers because they had access to feed. Otherwise, when you don't have much and you have to take what little you have to feed the cattle, you really get disheartened fast. So yeah, it's time. We should have done it earlier. It
yeah.
does do nothing really but provide awareness. But the province, I'm thinking, is getting to know how bad it is here. I don't know, has their motion been made? I don't think.
Not yet. Sandra, do you want to add?
Yeah, sorry, I just was going to just reiterate what Glenn had said too about the pastures. And anything that was grazed off earlier, has not come back because there's been no rain. A lot of the grasses have gone dormant. And I work at the auction mart as well, so there's been a lot of people liquidating their cattle. And a lot of sad faces, even though the prices are good, that, they're having to get rid of their cow stock that they've been raising for, years. So, and yes, the crops are, like you say, the canola especially, you can just see, not even hilltops. I mean, there's places where you can just see right down, there's the odd flowering, canola around, but it's pretty sad at this point, yeah. So I agree that it is probably time to call a disaster.
Barry, do you have any other comments?
Yeah, even in my area, I see farmers have given up even putting herbicides on and gopher control. People have walked, they're doing nothing. And then the grasshoppers are along the highway eating in the crops. But some of the farmers, they're not putting any herbicides on. They've given up. It's sad.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's comments. It's true. It's kind of one thing on top of the other. It's not really, well, drought is the first part of the problem, but then there's the gopher issue and the grasshopper issue, and it just kind of goes, piles one on top of another. So, yeah. George?
I'd just like to point out that under response options number 4, that ASB can declare the ag emergency today. I'm sure you were all aware. So option 4 is that under the powers granted to it by Wheatland County Council through resolution CM 2023-0724, the Wheatland County Ag Service Board declare a state of agricultural disaster within Wheatland County effective July 5th, 2023. Thank you.
What page is that on, George?
That will be on page 21.
21?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Member Larson.
I will declare that the Ag Service Board should declare a state of agricultural disaster within Wheatland County effective July 5th, 2023.
Should we mention the power granted to it by Wheatland County Council?
I
We
think
did
that's
yesterday.
obvious.
Yeah, and so that was resolution CM 2023-0724.
Friendly amendment. Can we just add that in?
Yep.
Yes, fine. Okay. Excellent. Any other discussion? Yes.
Maybe we should explain to our,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say local producers or extra producers, what that means.
Yeah. So yesterday in our council meeting, we actually voted to, so our Ag Service Board could make this motion, but our council needed to approve it as well. So we approved it in yes, exactly, in anticipation of this being discussed today. So, so at this point, it will actually be actionable. So that's a great thing. Yeah.
Just for clarity, though, it was conditional on ASB recommending, like making the motion today, just so that we could get the insight of you guys and have the discussion, like in this committee and with our ASB team here as well. But council didn't want any delays with having to wait till the next council meeting. So.
Any other comments or questions? Is anybody opposed? Hearing none, that is carried. Thanks,
Can we
everyone.
declare that unanimous?
We can do that, yes, yep. Very good. Yeah, it's too bad that there's not a kind of an immediate opening of funding for people to, but it does bring awareness to the province, and so that'll be helpful in them making their decisions going forward, and so it'll be good to see how they react. All right, our next agenda item is 2.3.3, COSHA, Wheatland County.
All right, I'll just go ahead here through the chair. COSHA. So COSHA is one of the most common weeds that we find. It is unregulated in the province except by 2 municipalities that we are currently aware of, Brazeau and Lethbridge County. And I had asked the fieldman in Lethbridge County a while ago if he would elevate COSHA again, and he said he would. So
can you repeat that, George, please?
yes, so COSHA is not.
Yeah, no, just the part about what the field man said.
Oh, the fieldman said, I asked him if he would elevate COSHA again, give him a chance, and he said yes.
Oh, he said yes.
He said yes.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Interesting.
Other municipalities have caught wind that we were talking about this and had called me crazy. because this could potentially create a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
Kochia being herbicide resistance, there's limited control, which is a bit of a double-edged sword. So it's hard to control, but you want to control it because it's hard to control. We don't want to be spreading that to our neighbors. I would like to point out in that my 8 years here as the Ag Service Officer, we've had many kochia issues. The last major one being the biggest one, and we still got control on it without elevating it. And I wonder if we would have even went to a notice last time, because kochia, once it hits its seed potential, we have limited options. Herbicide spraying after seed set is a waste of money. However, you could till it into your ground and then it's not blowing into your neighbors, right? Or you could mow it so then it stays on site. So there are some options that we need to consider regarding this. One thing that I had mentioned before is often if kochia is the dominant weed in a field, other regulated weeds will creep in over time. We don't really have that luxury of waiting for time. So my recommendation for this would be to very seriously consider the repercussions. I love the idea of having a tool for kochia. However, we generally don't go to weed notices. It says right in our policy that we are amicable, and if people are working on correcting their problems, we generally wouldn't go in with a heavy hand. However, there's always an exception to the rule, as we know. And one thing I can think of when people understand that kochia is regulated in Wheatland County is that there will be a lot more complaints coming. Now, one of the things in my old position we would always do was when we had a complaint coming in, we would also inspect the complainer's property as well. And this advice and procedure has served me well at Wheatland County. Often I will go and look at a site that's been complained about, and yes, it's valid, but then you go to that landowner's site or occupant and it will be almost as bad. So, this is a really tricky one, and kochia is so common. Consider that Canada thistle is regulated noxious, and it's in every corner of every field. So I love the idea of the tool, but I'm apprehensive that it will create a larger problem. But
Just excuse me, George.
Yes.
And typically kochia on a drought year is just, takes over. It can grow in any condition, it seems, in drought.
in addition to that drought year, people are not spraying their weeds in their crops. So it's again, compounded issue, very complex issue to just run with.
So is there a better time to spray? Like when it's young,
Oh, well, we always advocate following the label, right? So generally spraying with herbicides, younger plants is better, right? You're using less product, it works better. The kochia will harden off too. Once you have that seed set, spraying again is not advisable.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's perhaps a residual product you'd be using.
But even that will bring more awareness, like everywhere.
Yeah.
Even in the places where they're not farmers, like that's where sometimes it starts too, right? Industry.
Yeah, there's a lot
sites.
of industry sites that will be contaminated with kochia as well. It's very common.
Member Castor?
So this year was extreme. So a lot of times you'll be out there trying to spray your crop. And if you read the label, it says do not spray in hot, windy conditions. Stress-related conditions. And if you were lucky enough to have a little moisture, you sprayed it early, but everything wasn't germinated yet. Ground was bare. Get a shower of rain, you've already got it sprayed, and up come the weeds. It's not that easy to control. Maybe a year like this, mowing I would find hard to do. Usually if I can, swathing it before the seed sets and I let it dry up. But it's not, I'm not against, I'd like, my experience, and most of my neighbors around me are very good. The county has been always non-adversarial approach. They'll go out and notify the farmer. They'll work with them. They'll help them what's to do. Most farmers, I'd say every one of my neighbors, work with that, right? Our problem is we'll get some people buy land, they don't even do anything with it. It's an investment. They don't even touch it. And those are the ones that are giving us the problems. So we have to find a way to deal with that, and they have been good, but it usually sometimes takes a year to get around it. So we can think of a way in the spring to stop it before it's a problem, but we don't know what's a problem yet because it hasn't happened. It's a catch-22. But this year has been hard, and no, I didn't spray all my fields. Some of them are just coming up. And there was no weeds growing. Like, why would you spray this? It's just bare dirt. Then it rains, we did get, and you get a couple weeds coming up and new crop, but then you got the old crop there headed out. And you read the label, no, you can't spray it on headed out. Nobody can eat it, right? So you're done, you're hooped. And it's the year it is. But yeah, I'm against making it noxious. Same as Canada thistle, it's all over the place. Every year, some years worse than others. I think a couple of years ago, we advertised the best time to kill the thistles was in end of August, September. Something as easy as a 2,4-D will do more than expensive roundups and stuff in the spring. I think education that way. Same with the kochia. It's, for the most part, it's fairly easy to kill when it's just coming out of the ground with spray. And then another thing with the kochia, it loves alkali land. This year, the alkali with no rain is bigger. So yeah, I like the way the county, we've handled it before. I think if we make that a noxious weed, it maybe makes somebody happy, but for the people with the problem, the producers already suffering a drought, and we're gonna go hit them with a noxious weed. I think that's just, you might get a shovel. Yeah, so be careful.
Member Larson?
And another
Sorry.
thing too, and it's very seldom talked about, but in drought like this, and especially if you have livestock, it's very mentally challenging to see your livelihood over years for cattle, growing up your herd, having to sell it. People can sell and take the money and put it in the bank, but it's your livelihood. It's who you are. And sometimes the mental stress is overlooked. We do safety and be careful of combines and stuff, but everyday mental stress, where do people go for help? I know there are call lines and stuff, but there's always a stigma attached to that. We have to somehow let people know that we're here to help. And sometimes, a lot of time, that's more than money. That's just recognizing people for who they are. It's okay to say, you know, we're really feeling bad for you. What can we do to help, right? I don't think anybody's going to be buying any $4 to $100 hay for you, but still, just the recognition.
Member Larson?
So I'll just start this with, I had asked George to look into this because of some person in Division 7, and just to look into what our options were. And I was afraid this might be our only option, and it's not. If that's our only option, then that's not a good option. There's a couple of things too to remember with any weed. When you're in drought stress, herbicides typically don't work. And the other thing to remember is, if we can ever get it done, cattle love kochia. So there's a real easy way to get rid of it if you just turn your cows out on it. So I think I think there's probably a couple of other options we can use, George, but declaring it a noxious weed is not an option. We just don't. The unintended consequences of a couple of bad actors is going to be too great by declaring kochia a noxious weed, would be my position.
And apologies, I had asked Chris Perman to be available today because we can tackle these issues using the unsightly bylaw, and he could speak to that if the board so wishes. He is available right away for that.
Might not hurt, actually.
Sure, I will message him to come in.
Why don't we take a bio break?
Yeah. Why don't we do that? We'll break for 5 minutes and then we'll come back to it. Thanks.
No, it's too late.
All right, we'll call this meeting back to order. Member Kester, you wanted to say one more thing on our...
Just a little bit of a follow-up. Wheatland County, some would say we're blessed because we have lots of irrigation. We have and it's last few years, it's been with the upgrades in the ditches and all the pipes put in the ground. There's a lot of people taking advantage of it. This year, the snowpack was late, had a hot, early spring, snow melted. I don't know if everyone's aware, but right now there's water restrictions, 30%. So what you used to be able to run, the contract is for 18 inches. So that's a lot of water. People maybe put on 10 a year, but now you only get to use it a third of the time. And that's adding a lot of stress to infrastructure that you've bought to use for these conditions. And now that's even taken away from you. So yeah, it's not easy, even if you have irrigation.
Thank you. So we've invited Officer Perman to come to give us kind of an overview of how it would work to use our nuisance bylaw in the case of weed infestations. So Officer Perman, if you would like to give us some information.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the ASB. It's my pleasure to be here this morning to discuss the nuisance unsightly property bylaw and how it can affect enforcement of certain things. So the nuisance unsightly property bylaw, of course, 2021-18 was put in place to help regulate properties that are outside of what the scope of normal is. It's a minimum standard put out there to keep people yards and properties in a condition that is decent when people are coming in and out of the area. So when we're dealing with these nuisance and unsightly properties, there are two definitions in our bylaws we look at. Is the nuisance portion, which is a sorry, one second here. Any condition, authorized use of property which in the opinion of the CA or designated officer constitutes an unreasonable interference with the enjoyment, use, value of other property or the quality of life of county residents. And then under the unsightly property definition, there's a whole bunch of other definitions under there that would constitute a property unsightly. So there are a whole bunch of prohibitions in our bylaw, like say, no owner occupant shall allow their property to become unsightly or a nuisance. They're not allowed to cause it or not permit it, and so on and so forth. Then we have our enforcement conditions, which is what we use to determine whether or not a property meets the criteria under the nuisance and unsightly property bylaw. So the first one is the general condition and state and upkeep and tidiness of other properties located in the same neighborhood, community, or vicinity. The nature, size, location, and permitted use of the property, and whether or not the property is located within a predominantly residential area. The nature of the unsightly property, unsafe condition, or nuisance condition complained of, and the period of time such condition has persisted. Whether the property is undergoing construction, renovation, or demolition, and the period of time such activity has been ongoing. Whether the owner and occupant had previously been notified or compliance with the provisions of the bylaw, and any other circumstances or factors related to the property with which the CA or designated officer considers to be relevant to the subject determination. So those are the criteria we use in order to determine whether a property is unsightly or not, and whether we would take action on it based on a complaint. And complaints under this bylaw are to be in writing to our officers and determine why the person feels it's unsightly, how it affects them, and a few other options in there. Then our process, when we do get that complaint and so on, we do send an officer out to look at it. We'll then apply this criteria to it and then determine what actions can be taken. We have the option to issue a warning letter, which gives the owner or occupant of a property, it's kind of a friendly reminder, like we've received a complaint about your property, you need to clean it up. Or we can go directly to a remedial order, which is a legal document issued under the Municipal Government Act ordering a person to clean up their property within a certain amount of time, or the county can take action to remedy the property afterwards, and that's under the MGA. The bylaw and the MGA do gives the county the authority to go in and remedy the property afterwards, and then bill back the costs back to a landowner. We utilize this a lot for weeds and tall grass within our hamlets and residential areas, because that's one of our primary complaints is people just not cutting their grass during the summertime. And that's really what we use. We used it for several others too, like when there's lots of garbage and so on and so forth on the properties, but it's generally for weeds and tall grass. It's kind of all I got to really say about it at this point. If anybody's got questions, I'm glad. Yes.
So you've been using it predominantly in residential areas, though, in our hamlets and places like that?
Yes, Madam Chair. The spirit of the bylaw is to use it for the hamlets and residential areas primary. Everybody knows what acreages and farms look like after many, many years. And if we were to apply some of the same standards to those areas, practically everybody in the county would have to be cleaning up their yards.
Have you used it for like an acreage or something where the weeds are out of control? Have you done it before?
No, based on the fact that
This would
it's,
be, yeah.
it's the way the zoning is. If it's agricultural general, it's very difficult to us to tell somebody they have to control their weeds. It's really kind of outside of our scope.
Chris, could you please speak to when we used it on the industrial section out on the west side of the county a number of years ago? And that was pretty slow process, if I recall.
Oh, it can take months. So what we have to do first is we have to issue the remedial order. So that means going out, sorry, taking photos of the property, coming back, determining whether or not it meets the criteria. Then we have to mail it out. And depending on where the property owner is, if the property owner is within Alberta, we can confirm after 7 days that the letter has been mailed and served. If the person is out of province, it's 14 days we have to wait. Then we have to give a certain amount of time for the person to remedy. Generally, we'll use 7 days unless somebody makes contact with us, and then those dates are negotiable. There's also an appeal period under the remedial order. So before we can take action, we have to wait till that appeal period's up, because the person may come in and decide that they don't believe that with our determination, their property that is a nuisance or unsightly. And so they have 14 days to file that appeal with council. And then council can then review it And after the review, council can confirm, vary, substitute, or cancel the remedial order. And then if the person's not happy with that, then they can take it to Court of King's Bench to review the decision of council. So it can put a lot of time on these things. Like they're not done overnight, that's for sure. I can speak to some of our hamlets. Like we're proactively going through the hamlets, trying and get a lot of the vacant nuisance properties under control. And it takes about 6 weeks for us to be able to get to a point where we can start to remedy the property.
Thank you. That's useful. Is any other questions from anybody? Thank you. Appreciate your time coming in to help us with that.
No problem. Thanks for your time today.
Great. See you later. So despite that, I kind of still hear that people would rather that the ASB, the county, come in with a softer hand with koshia control, where those landowners are maybe letting it get too far. Maybe going in with a helping hand is a better option than going in with a noxious weed notification.
Just one point to consider is that if koshia was to be elevated to noxious, the ag officer and designated weed inspectors do have discretion. So we don't go to notices for Canada thistle. I mean, we can, but that's not our go-to mode. Again, our policy is to be amicable. And one other point I would like to mention is the city of Calgary had been considering a height restriction on foxtail barley. I'm not sure if anybody caught that, but there may be more than one option here than we have. Again, mowing a quarter section of koshia with a little mower is, I'm not sure that that's an option for a lot of people. You know, if it had gone that far, there's a lot of time and effort, and it's just not a real easy answer here.
Well, what are the board's wishes?
I'll make a motion that the board accepts koshia and Wheatland County report as presented for information. And keep up the good work.
Great. Any comments, discussion?
No, I agree that I don't think that we should present it as a noxious weed.
I think generally speaking, Wheatland County tries to not come in with a heavy hand in many cases. If we can, we try not to infringe on people's rights. So I think this is a good option.
Unfortunately, there's a couple of rogue landowners that don't listen to the softer approach. It's been tried many times, but I think in the case that I'm thinking of, I mean, it's been a significant impact to the adjacent landowners because it's been wanton disregard of weed control. I think just looking at the bylaw that Chris presented, that might be the better option because we're only talking about a couple of people here. And let's try and go at it with the vegetation part of the nuisance bylaw and see if that doesn't, solve the problem, because it's going to be, like I said, the unintended consequences for the rest of producers is just, it's not worth us going down that road. I was surprised that you said Lethbridge said they'd do it again. I was quite surprised to hear that.
Thank you for your comments. I'll call the question. Is anybody opposed? I should just check. Scott, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, very good. Thanks. So I just want to make sure that you're not opposed.
Yeah.
Very good.
No, we're good.
Okay, thank you. Then that is carried. Thanks, everyone. Again, really great discussion. I like how everybody's adding their information, their knowledge here. That's great. We'll move on to our next item is 2.3.4, Resilient Agriculture Landscape Program. George, take it away.
Good morning, board again. So the Resilient Agricultural Landscape Program, I'm just going to say RALP moving forward, as you can see, there's a 3-year general service contract for producers to take up best management practices. A lot of these do somewhat overlap with our ALICE programming. However, the ALICE programming does have a claim on the carbon credits. So this partnership with the province for about $14,000 a year is to promote the program and assist producers. Of course, we would love to see this option be available to all of Wheatland County producers. However, we've had very limited interest in this as of right now. Now the program is moving forward for another few years, and there is often a lull in the introduction of a program before people start uptaking it. So I wouldn't be surprised if people start approaching perhaps next spring or over the winter a little bit. There is also the potential partnership with, Foothills Forage and Grazing Association. Now they don't have an agreement as of yet, but they are looking for an expression of interest. And with the provincial side of this, I had made a expression of interest with the province that we would maybe be interested in this, because I wanted to make sure the board was, this was something the board wanted to bring forward, which I think it will be, but if this program gets busy, and there is a very good potential for that, FFGA could be a good fit for this, although again, there is no formal agreement here, so it would only be an expression of interest. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring this forward as information so we know that if an agreement does come forward, we can potentially email that out to the group and let them know if they're interested in participating with that. I would like to keep the board to keep in mind that capacities are very close to being overflowing, and that our conservation person, Sarah, is part-time, and she has a lot of stuff on her plate. So the partnership with FFGA might be good. Again, I would like to disclose that my wife is employed with that group. And so I just would like to see what the board thinks about this. Thank you.
Can you explain how it is similar or dissimilar to ALICE? Like, is it a complete overlap of service?
No, there isn't a complete overlap. There's a lot of specifics in it with rotational, and I can't speak to the specifics as of right now the way that Sarah could, but I could definitely bring back some more information to send out to the board if they would like to see more than what's in the packages right now.
And right now, ALICE is fully subscribed to or whatever, right? We have all of our this year's funding has been allocated to projects.
Yeah, except for some of the ALICE stuff. Sorry, I was getting some WRP stuff mixed in there, but ALICE is allocated, and that is a very popular program. So because it is allocated, this might push people more towards the RALP stuff as well, right? So we have been advertising this since it opened, and again, I've had 0 ratepayers from Wheatland approach us about this. So,
is there a difficulty with applying for RALP compared to ALICE?
I don't know yet because nobody's made an application. Yeah. It seems pretty straightforward for the most part, and then the counties will not be responsible for the verification of 20% of the projects, which was actually that would be a big job to verify a lot of that stuff in a very small amount of time with limited staff. So they have thought about some great fill-ins for that the county can't do everything, right? So.
So currently there's not an uptake in it, but it could be.
Mhm.
Currently, we don't have really staff capacity to administer it.
Well, I mean, we can always put one more in, right?
Well, we don't want to overdo that either. I mean, yeah.
I'm just trying to, so the Foothills Grazing Association, we could sort of sign off on our share of it and they would oversee it, so that would eliminate any capacity.
Correct.
That might be a way to look at doing this, because there doesn't seem to be, it's not like we're taking, like, it's not like we're going to bias to anybody that's in the process or anything like that. It's, then these people could just apply straight to the Foothills.
Yeah, so Foothills is looking at hiring an additional staff person who would handle all the RALP stuff, and they need a minimum of 5 counties to make this work, as they say in their letter. And Foothills has always been really good to us. We've been partnering with them for years previous, before I was in this position as well. So they would have the capacity. Now, if we made the expression of interest that we are interested in this, and then perhaps there weren't enough other counties to put it in, then we'll figure something out. We always do.
Sorry, just as a maybe, if I may, as a point of clarification to the board through the chair, the grant program offered to the municipalities right now for helping to advertise the RALP program, it's been sent out as an expression of interest, so it's not actually a program yet. So that 14,500 per year is not there yet. It was just as an expression of interest, and then the Foothills Grazing expression of, or say letter was kind of on the back of that. If that grant program came into place, they could hire somebody full-time. The counties could contract them. So neither of these programs actually exist yet, but they have sent out communications just requesting from municipalities what interest there may be if they do come into place.
Oh, okay. That's good clarification. I thought RALP was already in, okay, gotcha.
The RALP program exists. Is just the offer to give the municipalities funding in order to help advertise the program is not yet in place.
And we have been advertising already.
Right. Okay. So I guess the only downside, and I don't know if it really is a downside to partnering with Foothills Forage, would be that we would get 14,500, but it could go to if one of the 5 other municipalities, it wouldn't be earmarked necessarily for Wheatland County.
Well, that depends on the agreement Foothills comes out with. They may just charge on a per case basis. It might be a wholesale thing. I'm not sure yet. I think they were leaning towards like a case by case basis as of this point. So, and I'm sure there would be room to negotiate in that as well moving forward.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other comments? What do you guys think?
Well, I think that it's probably a good move, because if we don't have the capacity here, if we don't have someone to run the program, I think it's sort of no-brainer to maybe give it to someone that does have that capacity.
Mm-hmm. Any other suggestions or thoughts? What are the board's wishes?
I would move that administration reach out to Foothills Forage and Grazing Association with a response indicating interest. I think that was what their letter requested at this time, and that would be my motion. And then if there's further steps required, I'm sure they need to get to that critical mass, and then we can if there's like a more firm commitment or depending on what's required, if administration can bring that back. But I agree with Member DeSmit that even just the synergies of Foothills Forage and Grazing facilitating it and knowing the program well and being able to facilitate those applications for producers. Anything that we can do that can increase that support, I think we're open to. So I'll make that motion. Is that adequate for administration? Does that capture?
Yes, I think so.
Excellent. Thanks, Member Link. Any other discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Is anybody opposed? Seeing none, that is passed. Thank you, everyone. And maybe just a motion to accept the program report as information.
Also move.
Thanks, Member Brigger. Anybody opposed? That is carried. All right, move on to the chair's report. Pretty small report. Just the only thing between our last ASB meeting and now is in May 3rd, we had an Alice PAC meeting. And so this is the Partnership Advisory Committee for the Alice funding. And so like I mentioned, the program is fully allocated for this year. And but in fact, one of our projects, he's going to look into some other aspects of it. He has, maybe you can help me. He's got kind of grassy waterways through his crops, and he wants to find a solution for springtime flooding that takes it out. So he, but they wanted to look at, from Ducks Unlimited point of view, whether there was some other, whether it was spring-fed old waterways or something. And so anyways, it's outside of my scope of knowledge, but he's looking into other options. And so that one might get partially funded next year, as far as I believe. So anyways, really great uptake on that program. We obviously have producers in the area who are interested in doing some riparian projects and offsite watering and protecting our stream beds and things like that. And so that's really great to see that great environmental stewardship going on. And so Alice is a great program to help farmers achieve those goals. And I guess I would just want to point out that there's lots of other funding available as well through, I've got it printed here, the Agricultural Stewardship Program, Safe Water Wells Action Program, Shelter Belt and Eco Buffer Program, Wheatland Watershed Restoration and Resiliency Program, of course Alice, and then Environmental Farm Plan, all lots of different options, and Sustainable Canada Agriculture Partnership, lots of programs there for farmers who are interested in doing some environmental projects on their property. So I really encourage anybody to check out our website for more information on all of that, and happy to, I'm sure our Ag Service Group would be happy to answer any questions and help out where needed. So the other thing I guess I'll maybe ask George about is we had been growing, the Alice group is reaching out to 3 different farmer liaison people in the community to see if they would be interested in sharing the Alice opportunities so we get lots of ranchers working with their cattle, and we would be interested in seeing if there are crop producers interested in doing some projects. And so we thought by having a farmer liaison, just working to go out to different events and things like that and talk to folks, just people who know people and can get the message out, that we might increase those kinds of projects coming forward. So I'll just ask George, what's the status of that, if you have an update?
I don't have an update right now.
That's fine. That's something we're working on. Yeah. So with that, I will move my report as presented. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Hearing none, I'll call the question. Is anybody opposed? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. And then we'll move on to our agriculture and environment second quarter report and resolution tracker. George again.
Good morning, board again, through the chair. My report is in front of you here. I'll just give you a few highlights here. So we've completed all the paved roads mowing. We have 33 bait stations placed throughout Wheatland County properties. I'm not sure if anybody's noticed the difference over the years, including in Gleason specifically in the gopher population reduction, but it's significant. We also completed our Hoary Crest spraying program with Alberta Transportation. Again, the ditches in Wheatland County on Highway 1 used to be white. And that program has worked out so well, and it is such a great benefit to Alberta Transportation and to us, because that prevents the spread of that hoary crest into private lands as well. We are awaiting our tractor and swing arm mower unit. That's supposed to be a midsummer delivery, and then another 15-foot mower and a truck. Village weed inspections have been completed the first round. We usually try to shoot for about 3 inspections throughout the year for each village. And in addition to that, we take a look at Wheatland County hamlets and sites as well, Nameka, Carsland, all the places. We have had our rental equipment being utilized. Tree sprayer's been out a couple of times. Rokon unit once. Pasture sprayer with the new fee schedule has gone out twice. There's always interest in that, so we really like having that unit available. And then on a really positive note, staff attended the 4-H sales, and you can see the stats in there, but we were under budget, and I'm not sure if we have a butchering cost yet. Nope, we're still awaiting that one. Sarah had completed the Alice reporting, and then as of January 1, we've had about 176 Wheatland County resident inquiries. Lots of them are regarding farmer pesticide certificates. Gopher control options is a very serious one. There's a lot of rental land worth questions that I get from people, and so I usually submit the provincial documents that go to that. So and we have our ag plastics recycling program is still being utilized during like rain days or when staff can't go out mowing and such. So we're at 271 bags right now, and they've hauled 279. So that's reason there's a discrepancy on that is just sometimes they'll collect, there'll be leftovers from the previous year, right? So in this case, that's why it doesn't match, in case you're wondering. And you can see we've completed our events, and we don't have any coming up for the near future, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Anybody have any questions for George? Can I get somebody?
I'll move that the board accept the agricultural fieldman's report as information.
Oh, and the tracker.
Yep, thanks, Member Reichert. Is there any discussion on that? If not, I'll call the question. Is anybody opposed? Hearing none, that is passed. And then the information tracker is also following the report. I see that basically you have accomplished everything except one thing. And that thing is having to do with the 4-H sales, and so you're just waiting for the final accounting on that, and that will also be green. So good for you. Way to keep up. Is there any questions about, or did you want to say anything about your tracker?
No, I think that it's pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, we'll be putting some more stuff on that today.
Yeah, very good.
I move that the board accept the updated ASB resolution tracker as information.
Thanks, Member Bigger. Any discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Is anybody opposed? Hearing none, that is passed. So now then there is just the correspondence, quite a bit of correspondence attached to the report. I was interested in there was information on strychnine alternative evaluations. That was interesting actually to see that.
It came back.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it on the. There were a couple of other options that appear to be cheaper, and it would be interesting to see them. And, you know, I always think it's funny when they do studies like this. It's not until you try it on your own land that you see if it actually is as effective as they say. But looks like zinc phosphide, burrow oat bait, and the ZP rodent oat bait AG. Interesting. Looks like it has a similar site results as strychnine, so maybe that's something that we should be promoting. I don't know if you've been talking to people about things like these options. Yes.
I have a pre-generated email that I send to people when they ask about Richardson ground squirrel control, and zinc phosphide is what we're using in our bait stations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so you're finding it effective as well, your personal experience with it?
There's nothing as effective as strychnine.
Yeah. Okay.
So George, how is the availability for that, or how do you actually? So
I'm, we'll say hamstringed because I use it in urban settings. And so a producer on their private land will have a little bit more freedom in the label to use it. They won't have to put them in bait stations and such. I will say that the product is very dusty, so you want to get that out real early before the gopher babies come out, right? That's the timing of control is just so important, you know, when it comes to herbicide application, pesticide application. Timing is really everything.
Yeah.
And you'll use less product. There'll be less of an issue moving forward. So that's my big point is whatever you're going to do it early. So.
And how and where would you acquire that?
This can be purchased through the ag suppliers, UFA, Co-op, Agro, I'm sure other places as well. And I do make mention of where these products are available in my pre-generated email that I send out. So it's that's a tough one for everyone.
Yeah. And especially looking at it now when things have kind of gotten sort of out of control, and knowing that you're more effective to wait until next spring is a difficult thing to maybe you did take the other options for the rest of this year in terms of shooting them or running them over with a truck. Yes.
Yeah. It's never too late to make a positive change.
Mm-hmm. Member Link?
Would it be possible to have that email circulated to the ASB
Yeah, absolutely.
board, just so that we have that information? I do get a lot of inquiries about that, and it'd be good just for me to have the information as well.
Would it be also something possible to put into, like, onto the website or something like that, just so that, like, I don't know, like under gopher control or something like that, like a header like that, and then just have that information, just.
Sure. We have advertised on our website, County Connector and stuff with my alternatives to strychnine article, which outlines a lot of this stuff. But I'm not sure it's on the actual website for gopher control, so I'll see what we can do with that.
Any other discussion about any of the other correspondence? Is there anything anybody wanted to talk about? It is on our website.
Okay, good. Yeah, thought it might be.
Oh, very good. That's good to know. If there's a way of sharing on social media too, you could always, I mean, more information out there, the better, I think.
We did blast out a lot this spring.
But
over the
this is
winter,
it,
yeah.
it's the timing's off now,
Yeah.
so, yeah. Well, okay, very good. Can I get a motion from somebody to accept the information?
So move.
Thanks. Member DeSmit? Any other discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Is anybody opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Thanks, everyone.